Now we are going to start the last panel. My name is Karina Leon. I'm from the UFN network and also professor from the University of Buenos Aires, Argentina. And well, this is our last panel today. We have a very, very great and relevant discussions today in the panels, in the plenary, and also in the breakaway rooms. Now, our panel, we have two panelists today, Ronald Barnett and Melinda de la Peña Bandalaria. I will summarize some details from their trajectories because they have long, large trajectories. And then we are going to listen to them and to ask questions as we have done during this meeting. Ronald Barnett, he's Emeritus Professor at the Institute of Education, University of London, researcher on Ecological University. He's a leading philosopher, theorist, and analyst of higher education. He's the author of many influential books, a noted speaker, and a consultant on higher education matters. For over 20 years, he taught on postgraduate courses and supervised doctoral students and continues to act as an external examiner. Melinda de la Peña Bandalaria, she's Chancellor, University of the Philippines Open University. She's also professor at the University of the Philippines Open University and ambassador for open educational resources, member of the executive board on the International Council for Open and Distant Education. So we have great panelists today for ending this day. So we are going to listen to them carefully and then to ask questions here. Thank you very much for being there. So Ronald Barnett, you are going to start this panel.
Hello, everybody. My name is Ron Barnett. I'm Emeritus Professor of Higher Education at University College London. You can probably see my title on the screen, Reimagining the Futures of Higher Education, Straining the Ecological. So what I'm going to try and do in my 10 minutes is not only make predictions on the basis of where we are at the moment in higher education, but also share with you some thoughts about how I think higher education should go in the future. The organisers have set us two questions. What would higher education look like in 2050? Which methodologies will mark the pathway of the university of the future? Now, both these questions are important, but they invite factual projections from the present. Given where we are now, and if we keep rolling on the way we're going, where will we get to by the year 2050? And I'll offer some speculations towards that end. But this conference is entitled Reimagining the Futures of Sustainable Higher Education. And that's a much bigger idea. And factual projections won't meet the expectations of that title. So I'm going to depart from the questions that we've been set, the ones I've just given you at the top of this slide, which the organisers have set. And I'm going to go on to offer you some proposals for higher education as to where I think higher education should go and be a generation from now. But let's start with some preliminary issues. What are the big issues in front of us before we even start to speculate about the future? Here are some. What will be the state of the world, this Earth, in the year 2050? Will there be any life on this planet? Will it be severely degraded, with human life barely sustainable? And by the way, many students entering higher education now today will still be alive, all being well, in the 22nd century. So what is the world that we're creating? What might be the world that they might create for themselves? Higher education, I want to suggest, has no sure way forward under these circumstances in a way that is collectively agreed and adequate to the challenges on this Earth. There are two major problems in front of us that get in the way of serious responses to these fundamental questions. First of all, the instrumentalization of reason and knowledge, and that has a 300-year history behind it. We understand knowledge largely as a means of extracting resources from the world and of imposing our impacts upon it. And secondly, the growing use of higher education as a cultural vehicle for the development of national identity. And this is especially evident, I suggest, in one of the world's great powers, and I'll leave you to work out which one that is. So, given that, given the organisers' questions, what would higher education look like in 2050 if we do nothing about it? On current trends, and given the way things are shaping, I suggest the following. We're going to see more students in higher education, a rise, I would guess, from around the current 200 million students to 300 million students. We're going to see stronger regionality in Latin America and Southeast Asia and Sub-Saharan Africa. We're going to see China as an even stronger presence, including its influence across the world and not only in Africa. Higher education will become, especially there, a vehicle for national identity, for the projection of formation of national identity. And we're going to see, I suggest, a weakening of global rankings and global quality standards, much more difference across the regions. I'm going to see an even greater separation of teaching and research. And all of this is on the downside, I suggest. But we are going to see necessarily, I believe, ecological issues becoming even more paramount and across all the disciplines. There are four key issues at work, I think, here, which we need to address. First of all, the place of higher education itself. Will there still be universities? I think there will, but their influence will be severely reduced. The place of the humanities, it's become more and more fragile over the last 80 years or so, vis-a-vis the rise of STEM. Will humanities become even more marginal? Will they gain a new status? Perhaps they will at last be seen to be crucial in addressing global problems. Well, I think humanities will still be present and they will still be struggling. What about the place of students? Will the students be seen simply as objects and units of digital surveillance and manipulation, witness the rise of learning analytics? Or will they be seen to be at the centre of educational and human formation processes? I believe if we don't do anything about it, it'll be the former. What about the significance of undergraduate programs? Will life course education become a significant part of higher education? Will universities see themselves as having major responsibilities towards the ongoing education and life formation of their own students? I don't think universities are going to pick up this agenda unless there is fundamental change. The other question we've been set, which are the methodologies that will mark the pathway of the university of the future? I think we're going to see more use of digital resources and not just in asynchronous learning. I think we're going to see more multimodal learning, collaborative learning, students as a digital traveler being able to access worldly resources from their own computers or laptop within their own university or wherever they happen to be. And students collaborating across universities without moving from their own university. We're going to see more interdisciplinarity, but oriented towards more problem solving. Problems deriving from real world situations, yes, but problems that simply yield solutions to basic technological problems. Intractable, value-laden problems will be avoided. So what we're going to be seeing, therefore, on this prediction is the student as a heightened performer, a doer, someone who gets things done, not as a student as a knower, as a bearer of wisdom, and still less as a human being in a troubled world, or as a source of fundamental critical thought. So what about my proposals for the future? And this, as I said earlier, is where I want to bring in the whole strain and theme of the ecological. And by ecological, I mean much more than the natural environment. I want to see higher education playing its part in bringing about a fundamental realignment of humanity and the total world, more even than the natural environment. I want to see higher education and universities recognizing the total interconnectivity of all entities on this planet. And I want all of that to become central to the way in which we understand higher education and indeed the role of universities. This will be a fundamental ontological shift in the very being of universities. I want to see transdisciplinarity coming through. This is much more than interdisciplinarity or multidisciplinarity. For transdisciplinarity takes its bearings from a recognition of the way the world is, the way the earth is. It will be an ontological approach to knowledge. I want to see collaboration across universities, not just competition, but collaboration across universities under the umbrella of UNESCO and other world agencies. And I want to see students understood as human beings with developmental and agentic possibilities, having responsibilities towards the total world, not just the natural world, but every aspect of the world. Students stretching themselves out across the various ecozones of the world. And if that's the case, then the idea of the student as global citizen needs to be completely and fundamentally recast into the student becoming an ecological citizen. And this means that the strong link between higher education and criticality, which I see as being lost and diminished, should be resumed and substantially developed, with students being formed as critical persons in an ecological context. So those are my thoughts and proposals for an ecological realignment of universities and higher education over the next 2 or so decades. Thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you, Ronald. So we are going to move to Melinda, and then we have here Ulf-Daniel, that he's going to be the last panelist here. So please, we can move to Melinda de la Peña Bandalaria from Philippines Open University.
Good day, everyone. Let me first thank the organizers of this conference for this opportunity to share my ideas and perspective about the futures of education. So let me share my presentation. So as introduced, I am Dr. Melinda de la Peña Bandalaria, and I am professor and chancellor of the University of the Philippines Open University. We are primarily an open and distance e-learning institution. I also serve as ambassador for open educational resources and board member of the International Council on Open and Distance Education, or ICDE. So this presentation will focus on answering the 2 questions. What would higher education look like in 2050? And which methodologies will mark the pathway of the university of the future? Now, to answer the first question, what would higher education look like in 2050? Answering the question requires that we look at the major elements or components of the education ecosystem: the learners, the teaching process, the learning process, the curriculum, the technologies for teaching and learning, the university, and the teacher. As illustrated, higher education 2050 will continue to be learner, and learning-centered, learner and learning demand-driven, and the context of the learners and the kind of learning necessary would shape the configuration of the other elements of the education ecosystem. Let's first take a look at who will be our learners by 2050. In the Paris message of 2015, the projection was 414 million by 2030. The Monitor ICEF in 2018 projected the number to be 594 million in 2040, which will give us a rough estimate of about 800 million by 2050. These students would belong to the generation Beta, or those who will be born between 2025 to 2039. And if Generation Alpha was described as the most tech-savvy, having been exposed to modern technologies from the day that they were born, chances are Generation Beta are reaping or enjoying the most benefits from the technological products and services from the fourth and the fifth industrial revolutions. As such, they are empowered to shape their own learning experience, drawing upon rich learning geography, will have a near universal access to the internet. This is based on the 2018 report by the UN's International Telecommunication Union that 90% of the global population will have access to broadband internet services by 2050. It was also projected that at least 90% of them will be pursuing online degree programs, and education by then will be truly democratized and globalized, with students unhindered by age, social, geographical, or national boundaries. The learning process is projected to be powered by superfast quantum computing and communication networks. Virtual reality and augmented reality technologies will be so refined that they will enable online learners to have the same experience as their own campus counterparts. It will be ubiquitous, meaning learning can be accessed anytime, any place, any gadget, and by anyone who is interested to learn. It's available 24/7 and year-round across many learning platforms and beyond geographic limit, with contents coming from different providers or academic institutions. Learning will happen in a personalized learning environment, tailor-fit to what the learner needs, what they want, and the level of knowledge that they are in. Each learner will have a specific pathway program for him or for her based on the learning outcomes or competencies that he or she desires. For the teaching process, it will be multi-format in terms of instructional content. That is, lessons are presented in various formats like text, video, or podcast to cater to the different learning styles or preference of the learners. There will be the integration of the different features of the universal design for learning, and learning is available in multi-delivery platforms, including the face-to-face, if the learners so desired to have it that way. Again, it will be very much technology enabled, not only in terms of delivering instructional content and providing support services to the learners, but also in other aspects of teaching and learning, like using artificial intelligence or making other processes like marking of assessments, learning activities, giving feedback to student submissions, and monitoring the students' academic progress. There may be tutors to facilitate and helps facilitate learning and help students complete the courses. They may be different from the teachers who design learning and instruction. And teaching functions will be highly compartmentalized. Just like as I mentioned, there will be tutors, there will be teachers who will be designing learning, and there may be staff who will provide support services to the students. In terms of technologies for learning, it was described as new technologies and new realities based on the article published in 2021 titled Life in 2050, A Glimpse at Education in the Future. The technologies, which will include augmented reality, virtual reality, haptics, cloud computing, and machine learning, will make education more virtual, immersive, and hands-on, and will blur the line between simulated and physical because of the advances in haptics or the technology that simulates or stimulates the senses. Currently, what we have now, haptics is limited to stimulating the sensation of touch and the perception of motion. By 2050, haptics, AR, and VR are expected to combine in a way that will be capable of creating a totally realistic, immersive environment, stimulating the 5 major senses and other sensory perceptions like pressure, pain, temperature. And this would enable students to step into a moment in history and see and feel what it was like to live in another time and place. Visit places all around the globe and experience what it feels like to be actually being in that particular place. The technology can also be paired with remote access robotic hosts, so students can physically interact with the local environment and the people. Education 2050 was also described as the university in your pocket. It has been happening already for a number of years, and the COVID-19 pandemic hastened the process of enculturation through remote online learning. In terms of the curriculum, at present, we are already talking about micro-credentialing and unbundling of traditional college degrees. And learners will enroll in these micro-courses based on what they want to learn. This is very much aligned with the gig economy that is very much rising fast during the recent years. And gig economy should be paired with gig learning. So micro-courses, micro-credentials. There may be no more fixed curriculum, but more personalized curriculum with possible content coming from different education providers, and which will be included in the learning pathway of the student based on what learning outcomes or competencies the students may wish to acquire. There may just be degrees based on learning competencies that will be acquired by the learner and which will be manifested through assessment of learnings from different sources. Given this scenario, what will now be or how will the university look like in 2050? Of course, there will still be classrooms, but they will be technologically equipped to enable learners to access different contents with the immersive technologies. Universities may probably be more of research nucleus in partnership with industries, or a place for research and innovations apprenticeship, where students who are more interested to pursue a career in research will go. It will be a venue for the testing of the alpha and beta versions of the technologies before their deployment or commercialization. And most importantly, universities should have new business models, probably more of enhancing research grants as possible sources of funding. The traditional role of universities will still be there as degree granting, but will be through assessment of learnings acquired by the students from different sources and then conferring the relevant degree titles. Now, for the teachers, they will be more of content developers in the various media formats, learning designers, depending on the learning outcomes that they want to have for a specific learning object. A publication described the role of an educator in 2050 in terms of designing and code program items and situations using the different technologies or realities, immersive technologies, for students to interact with and to connect to for personal and adaptive learning opportunities. So for the second question, which methodologies or futures research methodologies will mark the pathway of the university of the future? I think that it is important that we know more about the science of learning. We can ask the question, do the classic theories of learning still relevant in a technology-enabled, open, and remote mode of instruction? The answer to this question will guide the teachers of 2050 in designing learning that will be appropriate to the type of learners and the learning context that we will have by that time. This is important given that projection that 90% of higher education learners will be studying online and most probably remotely. Trend analysis is another research methodology, especially in terms of monitoring and evaluating the technology advancements in the context of education. Educators can also help shape the development and advancements of technologies to make them more relevant to learning of the 2050. Scenario building in convergence with data science and asking ourselves the question, how can the data inform us in terms of predicting and projecting the years ahead for education? Cross-impact analysis, or looking at the effect of the convergence of various dynamics. That is, for instance, an example is technology, impact of technology on people, on environment, and how we influence the sustainable development of all these technologies for education. What we really hope to have through these research methodologies is a data-driven projection that will help us better prepare for 2050. So what will be our role? We have a responsibility to shape the futures of education based on the results of futures research that we will be conducting, but we should also be guided in this shaping of the futures of education by the two foundational principles embodied in the new social contract published by UNESCO. That is assuring the right to quality education throughout life and strengthening education as a public endeavor and a common good. And we have to have that commitment to include everyone, especially us from the university. We have to make that commitment that we should include everyone in the public discussions about education. This will also require that we work together, share the results of our researches, and even our own perspectives and analysis like what we are doing today and what we hope to do in the World Higher Education Conference in May of this year. So I think that's all from my end. Thank you very much for listening and good day to everyone.
Thank you very much. So we have now our last panelist, Ulf-Daniel Ehlers. He's professor for educational management and lifelong learning at Baden-Württemberg State University in Germany. You'll have 10 minutes, and then we have time for 1 or 2 questions, I think no more. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Welcome from my side. I'm just trying to find my stopwatch so that I'm not going over the 10 minutes. That was the wrong button. Now I have it. Okay, super. I'm very happy to be here and share some thoughts, and I'm very impressed by what my colleagues before said in terms of the image they have of the student of the future and how human, how we need to shape a human turn so that we really contribute to an individual development of those who are going to shape our societies in these times which are very, very much troubling and very much changing constantly. When I received the questions and thought about how to contribute, the first thing I thought, when I think about 2050, I think that and how 2050 will be looking like in terms of higher education. The first thing I thought is that higher education has always changed. It has always been a history of idea. If you would go back 2,500, 3,000 years and you would look at higher education at that time and whatever form you find, you would probably meet a philosophy in which education at large, education not higher, but education at large, would follow an idea of Aristoteles, which is having the objective to make people happy. and which is following this idea of providing leisure. If you then would go many, many, many centuries forward and you come to the century of Enlightenment, you would see that emancipation, with Descartes, for example, emancipation is the name of the game. So the individual is emancipating him or herself from societal structures, finding in own way the subjective view is born, the individualistic view is, so to speak, finding the nucleus of its development, which we see today also very influencing. And then if you again would go forward many, many centuries and you would come to Humboldt, which is influencing the sphere of the world where I live in very much, the idea of the modern university. Humboldt would probably answer the question, what is the purpose of higher education, by saying the purpose of higher education is to serve to a functioning state, actually. Now, the question is, what is actually an image, a philosophy, a thought, which has substance for our view on higher education today? And we believe very much from the research which we are doing today on future skills, on what are the future needs for the graduates of the future. What do they need to be able to do? What are the things they have in front of them? We believe very much that a substantive guiding principle, a general principle for the future will be the idea of transformation, of serving, of being able as an individual to serve in the transformative process of our societies. And we can name, so to speak, many, many transformation projects which we have in front of us. Why is there a rising interest today? Because if I look in my, so to speak, humble young history as a researcher, which is just 20 years, 25 years long now, I can see that today we are standing in a so to speak, in a crossroad of developments, which have been described already by my colleagues before, which are demarking a changing world in many, many respects. And when we talk, for example, about digitalization, digital transformation of our lives, I believe very much that we are not yet, so to speak, at the end of this pathway of digital transformation, but rather that we are in the beginning, and that we are now starting to struggle with the possibilities which we have in front of us, be it data protection, be it other fields. And we can see in societies, in the legal fields and so on, that there are many, many attempts to deal with these overflow of possibilities, which only digitalization is giving us. And there are many, many others which you find here on a, let's say, sketch with this very popular term, not a scientific, but popular term of a next society, the Society 5.0, or however you want to call it, the next society. The idea of the future will be induced and infused and carry emerging trends of all these different developments. What do we believe are the main trends for higher education? In our research, we can clearly see that what is happening is that students demand a greater lifestyle integration. That has also already been said. A stronger student-centered view of higher education, a stronger development, personality development-oriented view, as opposed to a standard offer of knowledge chunks embedded into a standard curriculum, which students receive in the beginning of their studies and then have to follow through for 3 years in 28 different modules, each module containing 3 or 4 different classes. So a stronger integration into the life, the walks of life they come, and that's corresponding to the next one, the lifelong learning. And that's corresponding also to a possibility of borderless education, wherever you are, life-wide also. A more experiential model of education. not a knowledge transfer way, but a reflective experiential model. More short courses, which are embedded into an episodical pathway through the life of a lifelong learning career, digitally meaningfully, not just digitally available, but digitally meaningfully, and so on. We believe very much that higher education in 2050 will be composed of 4 main elements: future skill orientation, the future skill university. What that is, I will come to later. Lifelong learning. I can tell you from my country, I can tell you from many European countries, we are not yet there to serve throughout a life. We are following a preparation model in which at the beginning of a career, we are putting a large chunk of higher education, and then we are diminishing throughout the life. We need to see this model in an exactly opposite way, to start and then constantly build on that. We are going to see what we call the multi-institutional networking university. Students are going to follow through different institutions, and they need to be compatible. Micro-credentials will be very, very important. Universally recognized micro-credentials. Organizations like UNESCO, organizations like the European Commission, the regions can play a big role here. And then the personalized curriculum, my curriculum approach, the participation in building my own curriculum as a student. What is the main challenge to come there? That's quite interesting. And I just put one number here, 192. We have looked only through the 14 currently existing German-speaking studies from the last 5 years, which are trying to find out what are the main important future skills. And if you list them all from these 14 studies, you come to 192 different future skills. So how are you going to deal with that? We need a framework, we need a discussion, a global discussion, a regional discussion to identify the main future skills. And there's not the one golden bullet pathway for every institution. We have, of course, to recognize that institutions will have profiles, regions will have their own challenges to deal with, and future skill profiles will have to reflect this very, very much. So we need to be able as institutions in 2050 to have a clear understanding of what are the future skills. And we have to change our education model to an experiential model. How do we contribute to that? What are currently ongoing future skill research processes and methodologies? I can point you to our main portal where we list all our research and where we present all our research attempts. You can find there everything we do open access. We are listing our future skill research, our future skill models at nextskills.org. You find there our reference framework. It's not one individual future skill approach, but it's a reference framework in which we center around learning and individual development, co-creation, interaction with the social world, shaping social ideas, and invent, innovate, co-create, and develop solutions in a creative way. These are the 3 main terms of this metro line, which you see here. And for each of these metro line, you can go to our website and you find a finder there. You click on each of these skills and you can download a fact sheet with a very good description, a definition, and so on. These are the future skill profiles, 17 future skill profiles. You can download everything which we have there, open access, the Springer books in German and English, a practice book also for universities and for companies to promote future skills. And currently, and that's my last thought, we are looking into a global panorama of future skills. We started the Global Future Skills Project just a year ago in order to find out how do you in the regions, in the African, in the Southeast Asian, in the Latin American, North American, European, how do you talk about future skills? Which educational ideas do you follow actually? How can they be understood? Are they compatible or are they so to speak can they be compatible with each other, so or not? Where are the differences also? So we are collecting future higher education programs on all 5 continents, just building a video portal, which will be released later on this year. We're going to have a Springer publication with more than 35 contributions on specifically future skills in higher education, which are coming from all 6 continents, actually. And we want to contribute to a networked community so that the future can be built. We are higher education with our students together, the professors and the institutions. We are doing that. Let's keep that in mind. We are the ones who are going to change this model or not. And I would like to challenge and invite you to take part in this challenge and to be the change which we want to see. Thank you very much.
Thank you, all of you. Thank you for the challenges, the proposals about learning, teaching, technologies, methodologies, optimists, pessimists, realistics, who knows. We have 2 questions from the audience. I will read the first one, and then you can answer this. How we raise awareness of the future changes and the speed of artificial intelligence? As I see here in Iraq, younger generation are not that interested, and economic challenges are already out there, such as high unemployment of graduates. We can do it. So about artificial intelligence and younger generations, that's the first questions for the panel. And then, well, your turn to answer this. Ronald, Ulf.
I can maybe start. I think artificial intelligence is a great achievement, is an achievement, a technology, a concept which will help us in education to identify learning opportunities in a better way. And it will help institutions to reduce the time of provision of materials. It will do the provision flow process for materials in a more intelligent way, profiled, so that time can become free for human interaction, for co-creation, and for building new solutions for the challenges ahead.
If I can add to that, which I find very helpful, I think we should try and keep IT in its place. It's very helpful, but it's not going to solve the world's problems. It's not going to help the catastrophes that are in front of us as a world, as an Earth. So IT needs to be, as one politician said of the generals, on tap, not on top. The COVID crisis has been extraordinarily instructive. What it has shown us that IT and the digital world, I've learned, has enormous power and enormous potential that we didn't realize. Take this event itself, brings us all together from across the world. But what the COVID crisis has also shown is the limits of a technological fix to the crisis we're in. The students couldn't wait to get back to their campuses, to get back to human interaction, to get back even, believe it or not, to the lecture theatres. So we've got to be very, very careful if we even begin to think that there's a technological fix in front of us to the huge, complex challenges and crises we face in a complex and changing world.
Well, we have a lot of questions. I don't know if we have time for all of that, but there is a question about the small communities, the marginalized communities with limited access to technology, for example. We'll comment about how the future will look for them, for this, that they can't connect or they are not in the map also, the technology map, yeah? Ronald, Daniel. And also, do we see the technology extending beyond virtual environments? This is another question that can help for the discussion. What are we talking when we talk about technology? No, it's virtual environments. What are we talking about?
I'm not sure. These are really big questions, and the issue is universities or higher education institutions everywhere in the world where I traveled. There's constantly the issue that people think they are too slow and too resistant to change, and they are not up to the task, and so on. And I don't know what to make out of that. When I work on the European policy area, for example, we are constantly talking about this, but we are very aware that it is such a high value that we leave a high degree of autonomy to the institutions, that we are not just ruling through and providing one and only idea of higher education. And together with this process, I find a super important value, autonomy of our higher education institutions. Wherever we have them, keep it, fight for it. I find it so important. And when we want to have that, probably the process of changing it is quite slow. Yes, we need more money. Yes, we need more interactions like this one. Let's fight for that. Let's work for that. I think this is the only answer to give to the question when you say universities are like cemeteries. They are never changing, you know. There's nobody standing up and joining you for the revolution because they all seem dead.
Thank you. Ronald, you have 1 minute because we have to close the session. Yeah?
Just add quickly, universities can't change the world by themselves. And it's unreasonable to heap all the problems of the world on universities. But in this issue which has been raised, what universities can do is work much more collaboratively together across the global north and the global south, so that the resources of the global north are being much more shared around the world. There's much that is starting, that's happening a great deal, but there's much more that can be done on that front. But I just want to add, if I can very quickly, that there are severe issues in front of the digital world. Manipulation of students is already upon us in the use that universities are themselves making of digital resources. So we need to be very, very careful when we enthusiastically embrace the resources that the digital world is opening up.
Thank you both. And well, we have to close because it's late. And see you tomorrow. We have a policy plenary at the first time tomorrow. So see you tomorrow. Thank you very much for your attention, for the panelists, for the audience, and for being here through the Zoom. Bye.